I do not even know where to start with this because I'm still trying to process it myself. This is going to sound insane, and honestly, even writing it down makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. But I need to get it out there and see if I am actually in the wrong here, or if this is just completely abnormal. A few weeks ago, my ex-mother-in-law showed up at my door. I did not expect it, obviously, and honestly, I barely even answered the door at first because I did not know why she'd be here. The last time I'd seen her, everything had been polite and distant. My ex-husband and I divorced a couple of years ago, and while me and his mother never had the worst relationship, it wasn't exactly close either. So when I opened the door, she was drunk, crying, and completely unhinged. I could smell the alcohol immediately. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red and puffy, and there was this desperate, almost manic energy about her. She started talking, at least I think she was talking, at me. It was mostly sobbing and ranting about how her husband had left her, how everyone had sided with him, how nobody cared about her struggles. She kept saying I was the only one who understood her, and then, almost as if she was asking for permission to move in, she asked if she could stay with me for a while. I was so stunned. I did not even know how to respond. I've never felt so uncomfortable in my life. I tried to be polite, tried to calm her down, told her maybe she should go home and rest, maybe call someone in her family, and she insisted that everyone had turned against her and that I was the only one who got it. I felt trapped because I did not know how to get her out without being rude, and honestly, part of me felt guilty. I didn't want her to be alone in that state. Eventually she left, or at least I thought she did. She promised to go home, but said she might come back if things got worse. I assumed that was the end of it and went about my life, shaking my head at how weird the encounter had been. A few days passed and life continued normally, or at least it seemed normal. Then I started noticing small things. Things went missing that I could swear I'd put in their place. A chair would be moved, small items on counters would be rearranged. At first I thought I was just being forgetful. I've always been a little scatterbrained, so I chalked it up to that, but then I started noticing shadows in security footage from my home cameras that did not make sense. I've had security cameras in my house for a while, mostly to feel safe and to keep an eye on deliveries. One night I was reviewing the footage because I thought I'd misplaced my keys, and I noticed something strange. There she was, my ex-mother-in-law, walking down into my basement. At first I thought it was a delivery person, maybe a friend, coming by without me knowing, but no, it was her. And she did not leave. She stayed down there for over a week. I couldn't believe it. I kept watching, almost unable to comprehend it. And it became clear that she had been living in my basement without my knowledge. She had brought some bags with her, set up a little area to sleep, and even started going through some of my things. I watched her move around like she owned the place, like this was her home. I felt violated in a way I can't even put into words. Then it got worse. I started listening to some of the audio from the security system. I know it sounds paranoid, but I needed proof. She was talking about me and my ex-husband, her son. She was saying things about being on a mission to bring us back together, to fix what she thought I had broken by divorcing him. She was obsessed with the idea that she could control our lives. Or at least mine. I felt sick. I immediately went to confront her, but the moment I entered the basement, she wasn't there. She had vanished like a ghost. I searched the house, checked the cameras again, and realized she had been slipping in and out when I wasn't home. The thought of her being in my personal space without my knowledge, without permission, made me feel unsafe in my own home. It wasn't just creepy, it was terrifying. I tried to process what had happened. I couldn't talk to my ex-husband about it because he'd probably just roll his eyes and tell me to handle it. I do not think he fully realizes how manipulative and unhinged she can be. She's always been dramatic, but this was a whole new level. She had literally taken advantage of my kindness, my guilt, and my sense of responsibility to insert herself into my life in the most invasive way possible. I spent the next few days trying to figure out what to do. I called a friend, explained some of it, though I left out the part about the basement at first because I didn't even know how to explain it without sounding insane. She told me I needed to set boundaries and maybe even get authorities involved. I hated the thought of it. I hate confrontation and the idea of escalating things, but I also realized I couldn't let this continue. I tried to reach out to her to tell her she couldn't stay. I wanted her to leave peacefully, but she ignored my calls and texts. I even tried showing up at her house to have a face-to-face conversation, but she wasn't there. That's when it hit me. She had been moving around, staying wherever she wanted, all while I had no idea. I felt powerless. I felt stupid for thinking that someone like her would respect any boundaries I tried to set. Finally, I called my local authorities. I explained the situation carefully, not wanting to make it sound exaggerated, but also making sure they understood she had been entering my home without permission and living in my basement. They suggested I file a trespassing report and recommended I change my locks. I did both. Felt like the only way to regain control of my life. Even after that, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. Every time I went downstairs, I felt like I was being watched. Every creak in the floor made me tense up. I started sleeping with a baseball bat next to my bed just in case. It's not how I imagine my life going. I'm in my 30s. I live alone. I've never felt so unsafe in my own home. I haven't seen her since the police got involved, and I'm trying to move on, but it's hard. I feel guilty for even being upset because part of me knows she's struggling, but at the same time, what she did was completely unacceptable. She manipulated me, used me, and violated my trust in a way I don't even think she even realizes. I've started counseling to try and process everything. I talked to a therapist about boundaries, trauma, and how to protect myself from people who think their needs override my safety. It's been helpful, but it's a slow process. I still have panic attacks, thinking about her sneaking into my house. I've caught myself double checking locks and security cameras multiple times a day. On top of all that, I can't stop thinking about her mission to bring us back together. It's disturbing that she thinks she has the power to control not just her own life, but mine and her son's. I divorced her son for many reasons, reasons that are private and important to me, and she seems incapable of respecting that. The idea that she could manipulate someone into reconciling with someone else through sneaking into their house and spying on them is terrifying. I know this is long and probably hard to follow. I'm still processing, and even now I'm not sure I fully understand all of it. I've learned some important lessons about boundaries, security, and trusting my instincts, but I am also questioning myself. Did I handle this the wrong way? Should I have been firmer at the door when she first showed up? Should I have called the police immediately? Or was I right to try to handle it calmly at first out of a sense of compassion? I'm writing this because I need to know if I'm being unreasonable. I feel violated, unsafe and emotionally drained, but I also feel guilty for feeling that way because she's an older woman going through a divorce. I tried to be kind, I really did. But she took that kindness and used it to invade my home and my life. So AITA for feeling completely violated and taking steps to keep my ex-mother-in-law out of my home after finding out she had been secretly living in my basement, trying to manipulate me and her son back together. Update 1. It's been a few weeks since the police got involved, and I thought I could finally start moving on. I changed the locks, filed the trespassing report, even installed additional cameras to make sure I could see every corner of my house. For a while, it felt like I had regained control. I slept better, walked around my home without constantly glancing over my shoulder, and started to feel like I could live normally again. But then the weirdness started creeping back in. Little things at first, things that I couldn't explain. My front door would be slightly unlocked, even though I was certain I'd locked it. Notes I did not recognize would appear tucked in corners. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. My anxiety was still high from the basement incident, so I blamed my mind for jumping to worst case scenarios. But then I noticed something unmistakable. Signs that someone had been in my backyard. Footprints. Small disturbances in the soil and things rearranged near the shed. I panicked. My first thought was that she had come back. I checked my cameras obsessively, rewound the footage hour by hour, and for a while there was nothing, no one. It was infuriating and terrifying at the same time because it meant she could be here, and I'd have no proof until it was too late. I started sleeping in my living room so I could see the front and back doors. Every creak of the house made me jump. I stopped leaving anything valuable out. I even started putting my car keys in a locked box at night. Then came the emails. She somehow found my personal email account, one I hadn't used in years, and sent messages that weren't threatening in the traditional sense, but incredibly manipulative. They were long, almost stream of consciousness notes about how she just wanted to help, and how she knew what was best for her son and me, and how she needed me to understand her pain. It felt like she was trying to guilt me into opening the door for her again. But this time it was digital. I had no idea how she even found this email or why she was still obsessing over me and my ex-husband. I knew then this was no longer about a visit or even a temporary crisis. She was fixated on controlling a situation that had nothing to do with her. She had already trespassed, manipulated me, and violated my home. I realized that if I did not take stronger measures, this could escalate even further. I filed a restraining order. I gave the police all the footage, the emails, a detailed account of everything that had happened. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, and humiliating, but necessary. After that, things calmed down for a little while. I felt safe again, though I still had nightmares about her breaking in. I started therapy sessions again to cope with the lingering anxiety, and little by little I felt more like myself. Then one morning I noticed something odd while checking the camera feed from my driveway. A car I didn't recognize had been parked nearby, idling for several minutes before leaving. It wasn't aggressive, but it was suspicious. I cross-referenced the timestamp with my neighborhood watch group and realized the same car had been spotted in the area multiple times over the past week. I couldn't be certain it was her, but given everything else, I did not want to take chances. I started thinking about the nature of her obsession. She wasn't just upset, she was planning, calculating, and willing to break laws to insert herself into my life. That realization hit me hard. I had always considered myself empathetic, someone who tries to see the good in people, but I had completely underestimated how far someone like her could go. It made me question how I interact with people in general, and how I trust strangers, and even how I treat people in my own life. I also realized I had to rebuild my boundaries completely. I stopped answering unknown numbers and changed my passwords and even started using a P.O. box for sensitive mail. Every interaction had to be controlled, and every space I owned had to feel secure again. It was frustrating and exhausting, but necessary to protect myself. Through all of this, I've had moments where I question myself. Some part of me wonders if I overreacted, if I could have handled it differently when she first showed up drunk at my door. But the truth is, nothing I did invited her to secretly move into my basement, sneak in and out of my house, or manipulate me through emails. This was her choice, not mine, and it's terrifying to realize how unpredictable some people can be when they feel entitled to your life. Now I'm hyper aware of my surroundings, more cautious than I've ever been, and honestly exhausted. The stress has affected my sleep, my appetite, and my sense of safety. I'm grateful for the authorities and my therapist, but I can't shake the fear that she might still find a way back into my life. Every time the doorbell rings unexpectedly, my heart races. Every email from an unknown sender makes me tense up. It's been months and the restraining order has helped, but I'm still very scared. I've learned the hard way that some people won't stop at polite refusals or legal boundaries, and it's not my job to fix them or manage their pain. I have to protect myself, and sometimes that means being firm, cold, and unyielding, even when it feels uncomfortable. I just want to live my life without fear, without constantly thinking about who might be watching me or manipulating me. But I also can't ignore the fact that my ex-mother-in-law, someone I once tolerated out of politeness, became one of the most destabilizing presences in my life. It's surreal to think that someone could go from being a person I knew casually to someone who invaded my home and my sense of security in such a calculated way. Update 2. It's been another stretch of time since I last updated, and I wish I could say things finally ended cleanly. But something new happened that forced me to rethink how deep this whole situation really goes. After filing the restraining order and tightening up my security, I thought she would eventually get tired and move on. For weeks there was silence, no new emails, no unexplained signs about my property, nothing that made me feel like she was still circling my life. It was quiet. I let myself believe it was over. Then I started hearing from other people. At first it was a coworker who mentioned that someone had approached her in a parking lot, asking if she knew me. She did not recognize the woman at first, but when she described her, I knew instantly who it was. My ex-mother-in-law had apparently struck up a conversation asking all kinds of personal questions: where I worked, how late I stayed, whether I had been seeing anyone. My coworker thought it was strange but harmless at the time until I explained the history. That was the first moment I realized she wasn't just fixated on me directly anymore. She was trying to use other people to get information. Not long after that, one of my neighbors brought up a similar situation. They said a woman had knocked at their door, introducing herself as family of mine and asking if they'd seen me around. She claimed she was worried about me, that I wasn't answering calls, and she wanted to check in. My neighbor, thankfully, did not give her anything and immediately told me about it, but hearing this set me on edge in a whole new way. She wasn't just intruding in my space anymore, she was dragging other people into it, creating this false narrative where she was the concerned relative and I was the one acting strangely. I felt cornered. Up until then, I had thought the restraining order and cameras were enough, but how do you control someone spreading themselves into your social circle, your workplace, your neighborhood, and telling stories about you? She was finding gaps in the system, ways around the legal barriers, and it was terrifying to see how determined she was. The biggest shock, though, came when I got a call from an unfamiliar number one afternoon. I did not pick up, but I listened to the voicemail later. It was a landlord from across town. He said someone had listed me as a reference on a rental application. My full name, my phone number, even parts of my old address. He wanted to confirm details. When I asked who he was, he gave me her name, my ex-mother-in-law. She had put me down as her reference for housing, as if I was vouching for her. That rattled me more than anything else had. It wasn't just obsession, it was an attempt to tie me to her life in an official, legal way. I never gave her permission to use me on paperwork. I called the landlord back, explaining everything, and he immediately said he'd note it and keep it on file. But it made me realize she wasn't just watching or lurking anymore. She was actively trying to entangle me again, to make it seem like we had an ongoing relationship. At that point, I went back to the police. I gave them the voicemail, the accounts from my coworker and neighbor, and asked what more I could even do. They told me to document everything, every single incident. They said if she kept contacting people in connection to me, I could pursue further legal action. The problem is, it always feels one step behind. She makes a move, I react. I never feel ahead of it. I don't know what her end goal is anymore. At first, it seemed like she just wanted to push me back towards her son. Then it became about physically inserting herself into my life. Now it's like she's trying to rewrite the story entirely, painting herself as this misunderstood, connected figure while making me look cold for pushing her away. I've been careful not to talk about this with my ex. I know if I tell him, I'll either end with him dismissing me or him confronting her, which would only pour gasoline on the fire. I don't want to give her any reason to feel validated, like she's in the middle of some family drama. I just want her gone from my orbit. So now I'm at a crossroads. Do I keep waiting for her to slip up in a way the system will take more seriously? Or do I escalate now, knowing she's already using my name to insert herself into places I never invited her to? Because if she's bold enough to hand my number to a landlord, who knows where else she's weaving me into her life without my knowledge? I'm exhausted, but this latest pattern has me more unsettled than the basement incident ever did. At least back then I could see where she was, what she was doing. Now it feels like she's operating in the background, reaching out to people I don't even expect, shaping a story about me I have no control over. Update 3. I did not think I'd be back with another update this soon, but something completely new happened that I can't even wrap my head around. Until now, most of the chaos with my ex-mother-in-law has been focused on me directly, my house, my job, my neighbors, even my name being used on her paperwork. It was always me in the crosshairs. But this time it spilled into something bigger, and honestly, I am shaken by how far she's willing to go. A few days ago I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't handwritten or anything obvious, just a regular envelope that looked like a flyer or form letter. I almost tossed it in the recycling without opening it. But when I finally did, my stomach dropped. It was from a local church. The letter said they were honored to receive my request to be added to their family prayer circle, and that they looked forward to meeting me, my ex, and our beautiful children. Here's the problem. I never contacted this church. I never made a request. I do not have children. The only person who would frame it that way is her. I called the church office directly to ask what was going on. They told me someone had come in person, given my full name and address, and asked for prayers to reunite our family after a painful separation. They said she was emotional and insisted she wanted her community to support me and her son as we reconciled. I can't describe the mix of anger and panic I felt in that moment. It wasn't just trespassing or manipulation anymore. It was creating a public narrative. She was actively weaving this story about us out in the open, in places where people who know me could stumble across it. This wasn't her just about bothering me privately. This was her recruiting strangers into her delusion. The church staff were kind when I explained the truth, but they also admitted they had no way of stopping someone from making requests like this. They offered to remove my name, but the damage is already done. She has shifted her tactics from harassing me directly to building an alternative version of my life and spreading it to communities I have no connection to. And here's where it gets worse. When I checked my mailbox the next day, there was another envelope, this time from a local community support group. It was a pamphlet about healing after marital struggles, addressed directly to me. I do not even know how she keeps doing this, but it's clear she's been signing me up for things, using my details, painting me as some character in her fantasy about bringing her son and me back together. It makes me feel exposed in a completely different way. The basement incident was terrifying because it invaded my physical space. This is terrifying because it invades my identity. She's out there creating a false version of my life, one that people believe is real, and I have no way of knowing how far she'd taken it. Did she give my name to more churches, more groups, more mailing lists? Is she talking to strangers in my city about me like I'm a project she's working on? I've started keeping a folder with every piece of mail, every voicemail, every flyer that comes to my house with her fingerprints on it. It's a stack that grows almost weekly now. My lawyer says this is harassment and misrepresentation. We can pursue legal action, but it's slow and she's slippery. The scariest part is how methodical this feels. She isn't just lashing out in bursts of emotion anymore. She's organizing, planning, planting seeds of this story in places she knows I'll eventually hear about. It makes me wonder if she's doing the same thing with my ex or with other people connected to us. And I just haven't seen the evidence yet. I feel like she's trying to erase my real life and replace it with her version. One where I am still tethered to her son, where I am still family, and where she's the martyr holding everything together, and I do not know how to fight that because it's happening inside my house anymore. It's happening out there in public where she can twist the truth and get people to believe her. So that's where I am at now. My ex-mother-in-law has gone from secretly living in my basement to secretly rewriting my life in community spaces I've never set foot in. And I am left wondering just how far she'll go before someone finally forces her to stop. Update 4. After the whole church and community group fiasco, I doubled down on documenting everything, every flyer, every voicemail, every time she tried to use my name or story. I saved it. My lawyer encouraged me to stay patient because harassment cases often take time to build, and I hated it. It felt like I was living with an open wound while being told to wait it out. Then something happened that forced the issue. Out of nowhere, I received a notice in the mail about a court hearing. My name was listed as a party in a family reconciliation mediation. At first, I thought it was some mistake. I've never filed for anything like that. But when I looked closer, I realized my ex-mother-in-law had submitted paperwork claiming I had agreed to mediation with her son. Her dream scenario of us being forced to sit down and work things out. She had literally forged my information and filed it with the court system. It was one thing to sneak into my basement, another to sign me up for mailing lists. But forging documents to drag me into a legal proceeding? That was the final straw. I immediately contacted my lawyer, who jumped on it right away. We presented the restraining order, all the documentation of her harassment, and proof that I had never filed or signed anything. The court clerk flagged it as fraudulent, and the judge dismissed it outright. But it triggered something bigger. For the first time, the legal system stopped treating her behavior as eccentric or just emotional. This was fraud. This was serious. The fallout was immediate. My lawyer pushed for stronger action, and this time the court granted it. A more extensive protective order was issued, with clear consequences if she tried to contact me directly or indirectly again. They also opened an investigation into whether she had done this kind of thing elsewhere, because apparently filing fraudulent mediation or custody-related claims is more common than people think. I wish I could say that solved everything, but what really ended it was my ex. Up until this point, I had avoided dragging him into it because I did not want to deal with his dismissiveness or denial. But when the fraudulent filing hit the courts, He was forced to see it for what it was. He called me, angry, not at me, but at her. Apparently, she had also been showing up at his workplace, spinning similar stories about me, him, and the family getting back together. It finally affected him personally, and once it touched his life in a concrete way, he couldn't ignore it anymore. From what I've been told, he cut her off immediately. He changed phone numbers, blocked her on everything, and told extended family not to give her updates about him. Last I heard, she tried to move in with a distant cousin, but even they eventually told her to leave when she wouldn't stop ranting about reuniting the family. For the first time in months, I actually feel like I can breathe. The combination of the stricter legal order, the fraud charge, and my ex finally stepping in created a wall she can't climb. Doesn't erase the fears she left behind. I still check my cameras more than I should, but I do not feel hunted anymore. So here's the end. She's out of my life, legally barred from contacting me, and finally recognized by others as dangerous instead of just dramatic. I have peace now, but it came at the cost of months of fear and stress I never should have had to endure. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.